everyone, this is Melissa Keller, Director of Events and Project Management for Vineyard Worship. We release a new single on the first Friday of every month. God of Rest, Dios del Descanso is Vineyard Worship's first monthly single of 2020. This bilingual worship song, penned in both Spanish and English, features songwriter Tina Cologne Williams on vocals.
Vengo a adorarte, vengo a cantarte, vengo a decirte, eres mi Dios, Dios poderoso, Dios del descanso. Mientras cantamos, aquí tú estás. You are the one who sees all our need. You are the one who provides. You are the peace that our souls receive. En ti podemos descansar. You are the one who sees all our need. You are the one who provides. You are the peace that our souls receive. En ti podemos descansar. God over our strife, God over our sleep, God over our trouble, our work and our rest, God over our future, God over our history, God over our bodies, people are led. You are the one who sees all our need. You are the one who provides. You are the peace that our souls receive. En ti podemos descansar. En ti podemos descansar.
Find God of Rest, Dios del Descanso, and all of our singles wherever you listen to music.
Yeah, because I think looking back on it, say with like I Love Your Presence, as a song is something that is, it can go viral because a song is something that can be translated all over the world and it can travel around the world. It's a song's this kind of like this unit, it's a completed thing, But in terms of the creativity that went into that, you can't separate that from what was going on in the culture at the time. Those little funky chords and the melodies and what was going on in people's hearts and the cool lights that we would set up at the burn service. All that creativity was part of it, I think. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
If you think of like songs are kind of born out of that. Do you know what I mean? And they can't really be separated from that. But what's great about a song is it endures and it goes on and it takes on a life of its own. But they're born out of these creative cultures and communities where something is, like God is on the move or something is happening, yeah.
The Ferment.
You're listening to the Ferment Podcast, conversations about worship and transformation. Today's guests are Darren and Jessie Clarke. Darren and Jessie are worship leaders, songwriters, and podcasters based in Nashville, Tennessee, best known for their song, I Love Your Presence.
Please.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at worshipteam.com. Worshipteam.com comes preloaded with over 12,000 songs, with new songs being added all the time. Hillsong, Bethel, Vineyard, Six Steps, Jesus Culture, just to name a few. Service building with Worship Team is a snap, and all the songs are completely legal and licensed. You can also find them on social media, Facebook at worshipteam.com, Twitter at worshipteam, Instagram at worshipteam_WT. Visit them at worshipteam.com for a free trial today. Complete worship planning with thousands of songs, easy interface, mobile apps, and legal rights for your church. All you need in one place, worshipteam.com.
Hi, Jesse.
Hi, Adam.
That's right. Hi, Darren.
Hello there.
Yes. Well, hey, for everybody who's listening, I'm in Nashville. I'm not in Nashville. Where am I
You're
at
in the
right now?
burbs.
Where am I?
We're how many miles? 30 miles? No, 30 minutes south of Nashville, downtown Nashville.
Yeah. What is this?
This
What
is a little town called Thompson Station. But
That's right.
It's
That's what I
really
was-
just the suburbs.
Yes.
There's not much else here.
Kind of in the country almost.
Just homes, and we're near kind of near Franklin.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember what the little bedroom community here was called.
Yeah.
Thompson Station.
Yeah.
I'm in Thompson Station, Tennessee.
Putting it on the map.
Putting it on the map. I'm with Jesse and Darren Clarke. And if you're listening, that's probably going to ring a bell for some people who are listening to this podcast, because you guys are Mr. and Mrs. I Love Your Presence.
Yes.
Isn't that true?
That is true.
Yes. I mean, what? Like
Deeply buried under many, many names
that's right.
that people think wrote it.
Always. Actually, there was a thread.
I saw it.
Did you see it? There's a
I
thread
did.
on the Vineyard Worship Leaders
I
Facebook
saw it
page.
and I resisted saying anything on it.
Yeah, because you've lived this experience, right?
Yeah.
We'll tell everybody what the thread was just to catch people in the loop
This
here.
is yesterday.
Yeah.
The thread was, and I forget who posted it. Someone posted on the worship leader page that something to the effect of, don't you hate it when someone posts like a song or a worship song and they give attribution to the singer rather than the person who wrote it, which happens all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. Especially on YouTube.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Crazy town.
Yeah.
But what I almost wanted to post but didn't, and I'm now going to broadcast it here, so that's weird,
Yes.
was that if people are covering your song, it's so cool. So it's kind of okay.
Of course.
You know what I mean? We're generally just really thankful. It is a bit annoying when it says the song's by someone else and literally people have no idea.
Yeah.
It's a bit annoying, but that's mostly just our flesh.
You get over it.
You get,
And you
over it.
And at the end of the day, what really is cool is that other people keep finding a song compelling.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
it's awesome.
anyway, thanks for letting me come to your house.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Hey, we got to do what we always do on the Ferment.
Okay.
We got to start with, who are you? Where did you come from? And how did you get here? And you guys, I don't know, whoever wants to go first. Where you from? How'd you grow up?
All right,
Yeah.
all right, Daz, you can go first.
Well, as you can hear from our very strange sounding voices, we're not from here. But so yeah, I was born in Newcastle in England, so I grew up there.
Okay, so
and-
for us really stupid Americans, tell us where Newcastle is.
well, you probably it's kind of like it's near Scotland. It's in the north of England.
Oh, okay.
Not near Scotland, but it's in the
It's up
northern
north.
parts of England. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's where I was born. So I'm a Geordie.
What
which
does
is
that mean?
That's someone who comes from Newcastle.
They've got a really distinct accent, Geordies do, but
They talk like-
I won't. No, I don't even know how to do that. But that's
How
where they make.
here, man, I'm going down a big road, ain't it? They
Okay.
kind of speak a little bit like that.
That
Okay.
was an accent.
Yes.
But they make Newcastle Brown Ale down there, Newcastle Brown Ale up there.
That's what they're famous for.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Is that considered the lake country?
No,
Where the lakes are?
No, further north, like way up there in
Way on
England.
up.
Yeah, way
Wow.
up there.
Sweet.
it's on the North Sea. It's like my grandfather used to do plumbing for the shipyards in Newcastle.
Yeah.
Amazing. So that's where you grew up.
Then I moved to London when I was a kid.
Okay.
And I grew up in London. In
Why
Watford,
did you go
in
to London?
Watford. My dad moved there for his job. He worked for a rank Xerox, an American company, and so that's kind of where I grew up. Just near where also Jesse lived in that area too.
Yeah.
Okay, so where did you live, Jess?
So we moved all around because my dad was in ministry. But from the age of like 12, I lived in St. Albans,
Okay.
which is north of London. It's a small city, historical city, and they have a vineyard church there, which
That's right.
which my parents planted. So I grew up as a pastor's kid. doing all that.
So that means you just grew up like completely immersed in faith, completely immersed in church.
Yeah.
Darren, did you have a household of faith?
My parents were, they were Christians and stuff. So we went to church and so on. It wasn't really a part of my life as a kid too much.
Were you Anglican?
No, we kind of bounced around between probably Baptist and Pentecostal. Well, my dad, his father was a Pentecostal minister.
Okay.
In Wales.
Okay.
So he has all kinds of crazy stories about from the Welsh revival and all these little, things like that. So that's kind of my history there.
Yeah. So you had a grandfather who was
a minister.
Deeply involved in ministry.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you were growing up, your parents were Christians. Was it just like, yeah, we're Christians, whatever? Or was there a bit more of an experience of faith at home, or?
Well, I think when I was young, it was just kind of, there's 6 kids in my family. So it's this huge tribe of kids. And, church was kind of just, we would go to church on Sundays, and that was pretty much it. Really, I think in a lot of ways, until later on. And I think my father, probably when he was about my age, had kind of an awakening, or kind of a spiritual experience that kind of led him back to more of a vibrant faith again.
Okay.
And
what was his spiritual experience?
St. Andrew's Chorley Wood. Have you heard of that? It's a church in England. It's actually where they planted Soul Survivor out of that, and New Wine, and some Matt Redman came from there, and a lot of Mike Pilavachi. We kind of got exposed to that, and actually the Vineyard, John Wimber actually went over there, I think in 1980, to St. Andrew's Chorley Wood.
Amazing.
And there was kind of a little mini revival there, and just, there was some sort of significant things that happened there. And so basically there was this little pocket, because England's a very pagan country. There's not very many Christians in England. So if you want to be a Christian in England, there's not really a cool factor in it, or there's not there's no sort of political gain, or
there's not gravity.
Yeah, there's not a social status. It's kind of if you're a Christian, you're a bit of a outcast or a weirdo, or so basically there was this little pocket of life in St. Andrew's Chorley Wood, in this little town it's like this little town in England where they play cricket and have all these little pubs town. And it's a nice town, and there the Holy Spirit was moving, and I think my dad sort of had kind of exposure to that, and it just kind of blew his mind, and it just was God sort of got hold of him, and that trickled on down through the family. By this time I was a teenager, and from an early age, because I grew up playing guitar. I picked up a guitar when I was young, and it just kind of felt right in my hands, just kind of I could almost immediately play it. Do you know what I mean? And so
I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
I mean, here's what I know. I know I play guitar enough, but it's a struggle.
Right.
Whatever I have, I got by blood, sweat, and tears, and then I still didn't get very far.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the experience of being, a little boy and picking up this guitar and kind of slide. There was, I think Mary Poppins was playing on the TV. It was probably Christmas time or something. And I remember picking up the guitar and just kind of sliding my fingers up and down, and hearing the notes kind of fit along with the, whatever it was, let's go fly a kite, or whatever it was. And I was playing along with it and just finding the notes. And I was like, oh, this is cool,
And so this is all happening at the time that your family's sort of experiencing a revival.
Well, no, that was when I was a little kid.
That was younger.
That was when I was a little kid. And then, basically, through playing guitar, and because I was a good guitar player by the time I was 12 years old or whatever, I started getting recruited to join bands and playing bands in England. And in England, the music scene is very vibrant, and there's, everyone, there's pubs and with clubs and bands playing everywhere. And so I started joining these bands with kids that were a lot older than me. So by the time I was 13 years old, I was playing in pubs and clubs with kids who were 17, 18
Like this prodigy,
and playing in London and all this kind of stuff.
Guitar player.
But of course, what comes with that is the drugs and rock and roll and all this kind of stuff. So from an early age, I got involved in drugs and alcohol and kind of, at the age of 14, I thought I was Jimmy Page. Do you know what I mean? I live in the rock and roll.
Yeah.
Live in the rock and roll
Did you have
lifestyle.
black leather pants?
Yeah, well, yeah, everything.
You don't even his outfits, man.
Yeah.
Are there pictures?
It would depend what band I was in. Like if I was in a gothic band, I would like wear all black and put talcum powder all over me to pretend to look like I was dusty.
He actually did that.
And but if I was playing in like a psychedelic band or something, I'd dye my hair blonde and shave my eyebrows off.
Is there evidence?
Somewhere, but I don't have it because I didn't know about Darren in those days.
Listen, if we could post a picture on Instagram, I would roll. I've got to have the gothic black with talcum powder all over.
That's pretty amazing, isn't it?
So yeah, I just grew up in bands. I loved it. It was like, that was my my sort of surrogate families. We'd have the black leather jackets with the name of the band on the back and all this kind of stuff. But by the time I was like probably 17, I was like, worse for wear. I'd lived a lot of years for a 17-year-old,
Yes. It's not the years, it's the miles, they say.
And I drunk my fair share of alcohol and done my fair share of drugs by that age, and
So his family was coming back to the Lord, drawing near to him, but Darren was out of there. Darren was not even at home.
Did you guys know each other at this moment?
No.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
So when did your faith become real or alive to you again?
So basically, I think probably by the time I was like 18, I'd been so involved in drugs and alcohol that it had become quite a serious problem, And I remember one night I was at a rave and I was at a club in Camden, in London, and I was kind of really, really high on drugs, as they say, And I remember this kind of moment where I had this kind of spiritual experience, where I sort of felt something change, And after I had that experience, just things started to change in my life.
Tell him what God said to you.
It's kind of a strange story.
It's a cool story, babe.
Is it?
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's a
awesome.
drug. It's an interesting one because it's a drug-induced
God
story.
spoke to you, and everything changed.
Yeah.
Listen, there's plenty of room in my theology for that.
Yeah.
Oddly enough.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, I was standing in this club in London, and I was actually kind of not ODing is not the right word, but I was like very high. And
You were in a scary space where you're
I was in. Yeah,
man, I've taken this too far.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, I just kind of like looked over this crowd of people, and I just saw all these people just dancing in this club, and they were like dancing up and down, and it was just like this, like that scene in The Matrix where they're
in the cave.
Yeah, it was like that, right?
Because you were looking
just,
down a balcony.
Yeah, I was looking down a
over them.
balcony, and I suddenly just got this sense of like, wow, they're all so lost. And it was like I looked, and their eyes seemed like black, and it was just like it was very dark, and I just saw that kind of darkness for the first time. It was just like everyone here is so lost, including me. And all of a sudden, I heard this voice in my head, and it said, "I love these people, and I want them to be in my church." And I wasn't really a Christian at the time, I'd had some faith growing up and stuff, but it was just kind of this kind of weird, was like, what the heck was that, sort of thing. But it kind of like rang around in my head, Yeah. And then that was that.
Yeah. What's interesting about that story though is nothing about the environment or even what you were doing would necessarily set you up to have those thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I hear that story, I hear that as, this is the Holy Spirit talking to you.
Yeah,
Right.
it was. That's why I fight for him to tell it.
Yeah, breaking in through whatever that is.
Yeah.
To even begin to divide that moment into lost and found. These are my people. I love them and I want them to be a part of my church. That's very specific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy, right?
Yeah.
And we know it was God because it changed you forever.
But what was interesting about that is after that, and I drank and I smoked pot every single day for years and did all the other things too. But I suddenly started, the desire to do those things suddenly kind of was taken away from me, And, so it was kind of this mysterious thing that kind of happened. And then some other things started to happen too. So there's this little chain of events that actually ended up with me being at New Wine, which was a festival in England. And I ended up standing in this crowd in this festival, and Matt Redman, the young Matt Redman, was playing,
Matt's like 1 year older than you, is he?
I don't know,
So it was a
same age as
young
me.
guy up there.
Yeah.
So it was
And he was
Matt's early
playing,
days.
he was playing Holy and Anointed One, John Barnett's song. And that was kind of the actual point, I think, where I sort of converted or whatever to Christianity.
You surrendered.
Yeah. It's just, that there was just, that was such a powerful moment, just kind of being there with all these people and hearing that amazing song,
What a beautiful story.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, huh?
That's amazing. Oh, and Jessie, so you grew up a pastor's kid. Did you just always grow up loving church and loving worship?
I would say yes, probably. Yes. I mean, my parents were and are pretty radical Christians, so they have this very dynamic story and faith, and so as a family we were in their world. You know what I mean? Every couple of years we'd move, and then we even moved to Orange County to the Anaheim Vineyard for a year when Dad did an internship there, and then moved back to England and planted the vineyard, which was like the third vineyard in the UK. So we just grew up with this awareness of God and calling and the Holy Spirit telling you to do stuff and you're doing it and sacrifice and faith. And so, yeah, I definitely grew up in that world. And the older I get, the more I realize what an extraordinary childhood we had.
Yeah, what a gift.
And a gift. In many, many ways a gift. But also, like, pretty weird. When you get older, you realize, oh, gosh, that's not a typical experience. That's not a normal experience. That's not even the experience of every pastor's kid. There's always...
Your parents were going for it.
They were, and they were really deeply motivated to use their term, the unchurched. So they weren't trying to do more of church. They were really, really trying to reach the lost. So they were incredibly on a mission, but they were passionate about church planting. And when they came across the vineyard, it was the worship that they fell in love with. But it was the Holy Spirit and the signs of wonders that just like lit them on fire. And they had no grid for that. They didn't grow up in any kind of, church or experience like that. So yeah, I grew up, my nature's very sort of accepting and loyal and all the things. So in some ways it wasn't hard for me, but I think that I definitely have my own path and my own moments with the Lord, where he spoke to me and made it personal. You know what I mean?
Yes, of course.
So, and there I can look back at the different markers. You know what I mean? I mean, my mom brought me to the Lord. I'm pretty sure of it. But I remember even as like very young, her telling me about the gift of tongues, telling me about being filled with the Spirit. Things like that.
Yes.
And I'm like, really?
When did you speak in tongues?
Well, I think I probably did. Like, she probably prayed with me there and then. And I probably tried it and thought, didn't think much of it.
Yeah.
And then didn't practice that or whatever for many years. And then I'm trying to remember. I do remember there was a ministry time at some church. It was probably at a Soul Survivor or a New Wine where they were speaking on,
Yes.
tongues and stuff, and I just started doing it, and it wasn't a weird thing. It was just like, oh yeah, I can do this. Like it just wasn't a weird thing.
It was just on.
It was just a prayer. It was just a prayer language. But I think there was definitely a time in between there where I thought that's mine probably wasn't real. Like it's probably not a real thing, or I doubted it and things like that. And then just
that's amazing.
Speaking in tongues, that's a weird one.
When did you two meet each other?
We first met in California because I was at the age of 19. I was actually this is kind of a funny story, but so after I got saved, I quit the drugs and the rock and roll lifestyle and everything like that. And, I had to like leave a lot of my friends, just leave that whole circle of people. Basically, Matt Redman, who was the worship leader, asked me to join his band, and play guitar for him. So I started playing guitar with him, and he wanted me to, play guitar at these festivals he was doing in the summer and all this kind of stuff.
This is early days. Early days of these festivals, but it really was
exciting.
Really incredible time.
Early 90s?
Yeah. 92,
92
probably, yeah. So I was super excited about it. I was like, oh yeah, this all makes sense. This makes everything make sense. I can get to use my gift for God and everything like that. Then I got this opportunity to go to California, and I didn't want to go because I had all these opportunities in England to play guitar and all these kinds of stuff. And then someone had this word for me about how God was opening up this door, and and that was kind of what was it again? It was
I can't remember, but it's pretty hardcore. It's like you've got to go.
Yeah, basically like that. and I sort of fought against it. I was like, no, because it was appealing to me to play guitar. But
it was to go to a vineyard.
Yeah, but it was to go to a vineyard church
camp, like
a DTS Bible school type thing.
It was at the San Luis Obispo Vineyard back in the day.
Yeah.
And it was a 3-month sort of ministry school, they call it, the ministry school.
So I sort of said, well, God, if you don't want me to play guitar, I kind of lay it down. So I kind of got rid of all my guitars and all this kind of stuff. And
did you actually get rid of them?
Well, probably, yeah. And then I think I bought an acoustic guitar.
Because he's Christian now.
And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to give up the whole. I'm going to give up the whole rock and roll thing. And then I got on a plane and went to California and joined this strange little community, where there was this little school with 10 people kind of nestled in the hills of California. And I thought like I'd joined some strange cult or something. They arrive. I arrive at this little airport in California, and I was this 19-year-old kid freshly off drugs, and these kind of hippies show
You're
up
about
in this
6 months saved.
And these California hippies show up in this like 16-passenger van and take me through all these like winding hills, and we land in this canyon in the hills.
Yeah.
And there was this little ranch there, and we spent 3 months just studying the Bible. And it so happens that Jesse's dad, who was a vineyard pastor, came to that ranch to teach.
For a week. They'd have teachers come in for a week at a time.
For a week. So whilst I was there, I ended up kind of bonding with some of the people there and became friends with the worship leader there, who was called Jeff Searles, he was a vineyard guy.
Yeah.
And me and him started a little band and played music together, and we became friends. And I ended up interning at the church, became like the church mouse, and stayed. And I literally just missed my plane home and stayed in.
You missed it on purpose.
I missed it on purpose, but I stayed in California and just worked at the church and just for free helped out.
Was that illegal?
It was. Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
what?
I just
illegal immigrant.
No, I was legal.
This is getting political.
We're calling INS.
Yeah.
No, you weren't. It was a visa situation.
No, well, I was there. I stayed there for an extra 3 months.
Actually, you know what?
This is back in the day when no one cared, right?
No, back then they gave you a 6 month. I
had a visa.
Now. They gave you a 6 month visa.
You just missed your plane ride.
I didn't get on the plane.
Yeah.
I stayed and just became, and I just sort of nestled myself in that community and became the church mouse, and I just helped everyone out. And
did that feel good to you at the time?
Well, it did, because I think for me, after going through all the drugs and all that kind of stuff, it was kind of like starting from scratch again.
Were you bummed about not playing with Matt Redman?
Oh, well, no, I think I got over it pretty quick.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, because I started playing with Jeff.
Yeah.
And
Plus,
Jeff
you got to understand, Matt Redman wasn't the Matt Redman he is now.
That's right.
But it was a move of God. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Playing with Matt.
But there was something special happening in the vineyard in those days. I mean, still, but in those days it was an exciting movement to be on. I mean, it was
just all over the world.
Yeah. I mean, it was, there was lots of stuff happening, so it was pretty cool. And
is that when you met Jessie then?
so yeah, her dad came over to speak at the school, and one day I was at the church cleaning out a fridge or something like that, you know, in the children's kind of ministry playground or something.
Yeah.
And then this beautiful girl goes walking by, you know, and that's
Well, actually, it wasn't pure coincidence because my sister and Darren's sister were friends in England.
yeah.
And they sang together. They actually sang with Matt, backing singers. So we would have met sooner or later, but that happens to be where we met. We happened to meet in California when we were all over there on vacation when Dad was preaching, basically.
Amazing.
So I got to hang out.
I was 16 and he was 19.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we kind of
Dangerous.
became, yeah.
So
Well, we
dangerous.
didn't fall in love then. That's just when we met.
Okay.
we became friends then.
Yeah. We became
And
friends.
stayed in touch.
Yeah, and then okay, so you just used the phrase "fall in love." When did you fall in love? We've never done this on the podcast.
This is a very sordid and dark tale. So you might not want to go. You might not want to go there.
I don't know. Give me any
It's
version.
not sordid. It's not
It's
sordid.
just long.
You know, just what is the Ferment podcast version of that story?
It's a tale
We
of.
fell in love I think
It's actually a biblical tale. It's a tale of biblical proportions. It's like something straight out of the Old Testament.
Yeah,
Yes.
it felt like it at the time as well. We're like, oh my gosh, this is Old Testament stuff.
Yeah. Like
Did you send a bond servant to go get
I
go
did.
find you a wife?
I did. No. What happened was that when I was a kid and living in California, there was all these amazing, you know, California girls everywhere.
That's right.
You
The
know,
Beach
but I
Boys
never-
sing about it.
But I never dated any of them because one kind of time I felt like God kind of whispered to me in my heart, or whatever, you're gonna marry an English girl, sort of thing. You know, so it's like I had that for some reason. I had that sort of feeling, you know, and then
So he was waiting for an English girl.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then she shows up.
And you're like, well, here she is.
I showed up when I showed up on the scene because I ended up going back to California on my own with my singing partner Esther because I was singing back then. By then I was singing. We went back to California and we asked Darren, hey, can we, because he was now a friend, not someone I knew very well, but every time he'd come back to England, we'd all hang out because our sisters were friends.
Yeah.
And we said, can we come and stay? Can me and my friend come and stay? So we went and stayed for 5 days in San Luis Obispo, and Darren and his friend Sean took us and saw the sights, did San Francisco, Magic Mountain, all the sights, you
That's
know.
right.
And in this time, that's when you fell in love with me, right?
Yeah.
Probably in that time.
I hear the one-sided nature of that statement.
Yeah.
She wasn't interested at all.
Yeah.
You know.
She's
I
like, I'm
wasn't-
going to get a California boy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just on I had done a 3-month worship and prophecy course in Kelowna, at Kelowna Vineyards in British Columbia, and then came down to California for a vacation afterwards. So that's what brought me to this part of the world. And, but we knew Darren and stuff, so we hung out for that week. And at the end of that week, Darren said to me, oh, this is an awesome story. It's just, I'm just coming back. He invited me to come and work for the church. Time has passed. Time has moved on. By this point, he's the worship pastor at the 5 Cities Vineyard, right? Is
Yeah,
that
I mean,
right?
I was like 22 years old, and I basically over the past few years, I'd gradually worked my way up from being the church mouse
Yes.
to being like
Head
this-
church mouse.
Well, yeah, no, to being like the assistant church mouse, and then the toilet cleaner, and then the you know, all these
He
different
actually
things.
did
And
clean
then-
the toilets.
And then
Yeah, it's not just it's a real
not
thing.
just one of those sayings.
It's not just
Yeah.
a story.
Sometimes the
Assistant-
toilets have to be cleaned.
yeah.
Yes.
So I developed like the toilet cleaning ministries in the church, and I did so well. They then promoted me to like the assistant of the pastor and all these
Yes.
different things. And but eventually I got promoted to worship leader. And so when Jessie came, I was freshly, you know, anointed as the worship leader
Yes.
a week into the job.
And
I
you're
was-
already offering jobs to other
and
people.
I was
Yes.
very at this point I was very excited and full of myself and thought, you know, thought that I'd sort of conquered the world or whatever.
Yeah.
So I thought all of a sudden
He literally offered me a job.
I had
And he
the
hadn't talked to anyone
I
else
hadn't
about
talked to
it.
the pastor about it or anything.
Amazing.
I'm just
Yes.
like
You should be the assistant worship pastor here.
Exactly.
We'll pay you some money.
Yeah.
He said, why don't you come back, work with the bands? Because basically Darren was, by this point, you were leading a bunch of bands, weren't you?
Yeah.
And they were mostly high school kids who couldn't play music at all.
Yeah.
Some of them could.
Yeah.
So we had this, crazy thing happening, but he said, why don't you come over here? We'll find you somewhere to live. We'll give you a job, and you can help me with the high school kids. You can help me with all the girls in the worship department and stuff like that. And I was like, what? I didn't say no. I think I said, what? I'm like, I'll pray about it. I was going back home to England to see my family after 3 months away. It was not on my grid to be moving. And I had the audacity to believe in my heart that if God was going to move me across the other side of the world, that he would give me some warning first, that I'd have a hunch about it, that I'd know who was going to do it. So it can't be the Lord.
Yeah, this is too random.
Too out of nowhere. It can't be the Lord. So I quickly wrote it off because I didn't honestly want to do it. I told him I'd pray about it. We weren't romantically involved. We did hit it off though, like really hit it off as friends. But I went back to England that summer and I just couldn't shake this invitation. I really didn't want to do it. I was a home girl. I was passionate about St. Albans. I was singing with Matt by now, really involved in both our family church, St. Albans Vineyard, and I was really involved in Soul Survivor, which was a new church and a youth church, and singing with Matt and all these exciting things. So I don't want to go on the other side of the world from my family, So I wrote it off. But as the summer progressed, I was like, I think I'm meant to do it.
That took root.
I think I'm meant to go. And I remember a moment laying in bed, literally saying, okay, Lord, well, if this stuff is true, everything that have been raised to believe, everything that I say I believe, everything I sing about, then this is crunch time. This is me doing it. This is me being obedient to you. And, so I decided to to go to California.
Yes. Yeah. To the land
take up my
of
cross
infinite sunshine.
to the beach.
Yes.
I know, isn't that funny? I was
Yeah.
so not wanting to do it, but I really wasn't wanting to do it. I didn't want to go. So,
Meanwhile, I'd gone to the pastor and said, "Good news! I've offered Jessie a job, and she can come. She's
agreed.
She's going to come to California. She's going to help. Do the bands and all this kind of stuff. So I've offered her this job." And he's like, "You did what? You can't just offer someone a job. We can't just do this. Sort of thing." So that was a little bit awkward.
So
I didn't know any of this stuff. I thought that
you...
it was approved. I thought it was approved by the pastor. I thought it came down from them. I thought they really wanted me on the team.
No, and so then he's like, "Well, obviously we would love for her to, come and be part of the church and do all these things, but we can't afford to pay for her ticket, and we can't afford to pay her and all these kinds of things." So I'm like, oh, okay. What am I going to do here? I'm kind of a problem-solving person. That's kind of my thing. So I was like, okay. Well, at the time I had no money. I was on a very, very small salary and stuff like that. I wore clothes that people gave me. I drove a car that had been donated to me. So I had nothing to my name except I had one thing. And that was like, even though I was, dressed in rags, I had the best guitar amplifier money could buy.
Yes.
I had a Mesa Boogie Triaxis, which at the time was the king of...
All the guitar players from the 90s are like,
it glows.
I mean, that was like Sean Tubbs territory, and so I had this Triaxis. So I was like, okay, I'm going to sell my Triaxis. And that was the ultimate...
That's true love.
That is true love. That was the ultimate sacrifice.
Jesus.
all of this is
Jesus
completely...
lays down his life for the church.
So
Darren sells his guitar amp.
Yeah, so I sold my Mesa Boogie Triaxis.
I don't know any of this is going on.
Yeah.
I think that the Lord has called me and the church wants me and I'm doing the work of the Lord.
Yes.
And he's behind the scenes selling guitar gear.
Yeah.
I love this.
Keeping me in this illusion that
you hear that?
Yeah.
So it was kind of a high stakes game that I was
I
playing.
hope all the guys who are listening to the Ferment podcast right now, I hope they're taking notes.
Well, it could have gone very badly, or
Yes.
but you know,
I mean, but it would be nice to say 3 months later we fell in love and it was all, you know,
Of course.
it was all great. But it was another, like, we're talking a year after that until we finally got together, wasn't it?
yeah.
I really put him through the ringer.
Did
I
you?
was holding him off for a long time, weren't I, babe?
She wasn't interested in me.
Did you ever tell her, hey, when did you tell her you sold the guitar amp so that she could come?
Well, you know what was funny about it was this was something that, to the credit of the pastor that I was working with,
Yeah.
he said to me, okay, well, you know, you've got to speak to her father, to Jessie's father,
This is where it gets weird,
tell
man.
him what's going on and stuff like that. So, and I was like, no, I don't. So, but I knew it was right. So anyway,
Why did you have to speak to my dad?
why did I have to speak to your dad?
Why do you think that was?
I think maybe just
For accountability?
accountability. Yeah.
Otherwise, it would have been weird. Like,
Yeah.
it was a bit weird.
So
a bit weird.
you call Mr. Lane up.
Yeah, and I talked to him and told him, you know, just told him the whole story, you know.
Yeah.
And then basically, let me see.
What did he tell you? He told you something.
Yeah,
So thank you for telling me.
So he basically said to me, okay, that's cool and everything. And he goes, I think you should just hide your feelings in your heart. You know, you don't need to tell her or anything, you know, sort of thing. So that's what I did. I just sort of
He didn't say, that's fine, you can have her hand in marriage.
No.
You know.
Yes.
But he was basically saying, I don't, you know, just thank you for telling me, but I think you should just hide your feelings, you know, sort of thing,
Which was
in your
wisdom
heart.
from my dad.
So
right
I
there.
did that, and so we became friends, and we just hung out, and for about a year we were just friends, and I was in love with her, and she wasn't interested in me, so there was a lot of heartbreak for me, but it was just like
I wasn't romantically interested in you. We hung
We
out
were friends.
all the time.
Yeah.
Because we were working together.
yeah,
We had this crazy worship house where we had those like 8 bands.
yeah,
All but one were like high school
just
kids.
making loads of music.
Ryan
and just-
Delmore was
Yeah.
in that whole mix with us, and Sarah. They were newly married, and it was crazy times.
Why don't you talk to us about the synergy of that moment? Because that's really interesting.
we had a little
Which moment?
we had a little Bible study.
Well, just, you know, like think about that. I mean, most churches don't have this kind of a worship culture that kind of like just springs up out of nowhere, where you have all these bands,
Yeah.
all this music, the burn service,
Yeah.
right? Like all these things just start popping up.
Yeah.
There was
It's
this-
clearly some sort of a move of the spirit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was. And that was why I felt called there. And then what's kept me there wasn't that I was in love with Darren, but that I wasn't yet, but it was that God was doing something and we were a part of it. You know what I mean? It was an
How did it start?
extraordinary thing.
There was this guy called PJ Wall, and he had a surf shop in Pismo Beach in California, and he started a little Bible study at his house, and it kind of grew into almost like a little mini revival. There was like 60 kids, all these little surf beach bums from California would go to his house, and they would just hang out, and me and Ryan were the worship leaders there. So we would just bring our acoustic guitars and play, you know, Martin Smith songs and stuff like this, you know. And it was this amazing little kind of Vineyard home group that just kind of grew really big. And that was the seeds of the burn service. And then when Terry Page was the pastor of the burn service, he essentially started to kind of lead that group. And from that Bible study, we started planting these little evening meetings, and you know, we did the burn service meeting was we started meeting at a school, and we would just do these really creative kind of church services that were very different from what, you know, we would do kind of extended worship, and we would make all kinds of cool like art structures and have kind of, you know, very creative approach.
I think what happened when I'm thinking about it now is that Darren and I had been exposed to these youth services and Holy Spirit moves happening in the UK, like with Soul Survivor, and Terry Page, he had spent a long time living in London as well, so he knew what that was, and he had seen it and was excited, and we knew what that was, and we
You brought
had
it
seen
with
it.
you.
So when Terry said, let's start a youth service, Darren and I were like, yeah, let's do that. And we had this whole grid for what that might look like. The surfer kids maybe, you know, the surf community that we were in. And I guess it was just, you know, they hadn't ever seen it because England's a whole long, far away, you know. And so we just started doing what we did. But I think it was intentional. Like, let's start a youth service. It's going to be targeted for young people. It's going to be evangelistic.
But there was a lot of creativity to it.
And we're building it around the music.
Because we would write, we would just write our own songs for it right from the beginning.
Terry would make you write songs.
We started creating a lot of songs for it.
What a great pastoral intuition, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that. Every really transformational songwriting community that I've either been a part of or known about, there's always tremendous pastoral permission or invitation to write songs for the moment or the service.
Absolutely.
Right?
Terry used to actually force us, like, because I was the worship pastor of the church, or, you know, so we would do our normal Sunday morning meetings that were more of just a regular church, the Vineyard Church thing. And then we would do this alternate service in the evening. And he would say to me, you know, I'd play him a new song and I'd be all kind of embarrassed about it and just kind of play it for him. And he'd be like, that's great. He goes, if you don't play that on Sunday, I'm going to fire you.
I love this.
But I needed that, you know, because, you know, someone to push you. A lot of times artists kind of need that, you know, someone to believe in them and so on.
Yeah. They need
did you
someone to
appreciate
believe them.
that at the moment?
I don't know if I appreciated it at the moment. I mean, I think I just, I mean, at that age and that moment, it was just, the whole thing was kind of like a roller coaster ride. Do you know what I mean? Because it was just.
Well, it went on to be something.
But I respected him.
It went on to be something much bigger than we realized. I mean, it was a very small scale thing. I mean, it started you were doing stuff in a coffee shop. I mean, it was a very small scale thing, but Delmore is a prolific songwriter, and was, even then, he was writing so many songs, and the two of them would spur each other on writing these songs. They'd have a different style, each of them, but.
And we also started to like develop sounds. Like there was this certain thing, for example, like Ryan had a certain sound that was very influenced by certain bands, you know, a lot of kind of 60s stuff, you know, and things like that. And so it was kind of a unique sound that he'd developed. And at the time, you know, we'd started to find certain things, like there was this sound that we created with these 2 finger chords, you know, those little chords like the sound of I Love Your Presence, but it's built around these certain kind of like, you know, dyads where you slide your fingers up and down the guitar, you know. And at the time, that was a different sound, you know. It was like something, I mean, it's commonplace now, but at the time, that was like something different, you know, rather than the traditional cowboy chords that were in the other songs. So we started to experiment with these types of alternative sounding music and alternative melodies, and we started to create our own kind of distinct kind of sounds, you know.
Hello, everyone. Adam here. Wanted to break into our conversation really quickly just to remind you of our Sing Together conference that's happening this March 26, 27, and 28 in Nashville, Tennessee. It is the first national worship conference that we have hosted in the Vineyard for over 20 years, and for that reason, we are really, really excited. It's always great to have everybody in the room at the same time. I found that special things happen when we're all together. Anyhow, some of our best friends are going to be there. Eleanor Mumford is coming to speak to us. Dee Wilson from Common Hymnal is going to be there. I'm going to be there. And then we have some other friends that we're going to release here in a few weeks who are joining us as well. We're getting all the details settled. And the thing for you to do today is to sign up, because space is very limited. Lots of people have already registered, and that limited space has become even more limited. So why not go on to vineyardworship.com today and sign up, because I would really, really love to have you in the room. All right. Peace. I love that, because part of what I'm hearing in this particular story is you have a pastor who's not just giving permission, but really pressing the issue with you guys.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
please write for this moment.
Yeah.
If you don't, I'm going to fire you. Of course,
Yeah.
he's being silly, but he's also being serious in a way,
Yeah.
like in terms of being serious in the invitation. But then I'm also hearing there's something about this moment that was so free that you were not just writing songs, but like, I think this is really important, what you're saying about, like, there's a sound that's involved with it.
Yeah. And I think that's why, I think in some ways when I look back on it, that's why the song I Love Your Presence has kind of resonated with so many people in many ways, is because, like, for us, that's when we wrote that song, it came so easily. Like, we were sitting in her bedroom this is when we were still dating. We just started dating, and I was sitting on her bed playing the guitar, and I was using those sliding chords. I was like, you know, we'd written tons of songs with that same kind of chord progression. So we'd tried every kind of progression you could think of, you know, with those two chords. And so I was playing those chords, and I just started singing, you know, in the glory of your presence. I just sang the verse straight out of, you know, almost like improvising it. And then she just was brushing her hair, and she just, I love. She started singing the chorus.
Really?
And that's how we wrote it. And it just came like that.
Like,
But it was this,
like in one moment.
yeah. And it was like I sang the verse and she sang
Actually,
the
he
chorus.
changed one line of my chorus, and I was really annoyed about it, but it was the right thing to do.
Okay, so I have another question. Since we're talking about this song, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay, so the verse with the interesting chords,
Yeah.
the little
Yeah.
2-note
Yeah.
slidey chords,
Yeah.
kind of minory.
Yeah.
The chorus
Yeah.
has the major lift,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Darren, are you minory?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh yeah, so us.
And then,
I am.
and,
So
and then
us.
Jesse, are you majory and happy? Because this is how I
Yeah.
experience,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That is,
Yeah.
I'm nodding.
Yeah.
I'm just.
No, I'm minor all the way. Yeah. That's what's great is, like, when
He's
I
deep
mean,
in searching.
that's a big part of, for me, success in life has been working with major people. You know, like right now I'm working with a songwriter called Jess Cates, who's amazing, and he's all the way. He's like an E major chord.
Sunshine?
Yeah, he's
Just
amazing.
Sunshine?
He's an amazing person. So it's like when I work with someone like that, because the minor and the major make a beautiful, you know, marriage. You know, so,
I just think this is so interesting, because I think that's one of the coolest parts of that song is just the way that those two parts are very different, but really complement one another.
Yeah.
I just think it's very interesting
So,
that
I mean,
it's coming out of your actual personhood
yeah. And
in
I
a
think
beautiful way.
I think what's
Yeah.
interesting about that song is that even though it came very easily, and since we wrote it, I think part of what's the succession of that song too is that we wrote it and then it went out into the world. And then it went through all these different iterations where each person that played it brought their own thing to the table. Like, you know, when Brenton Brown did it, he interpreted it in a certain way. And when they did it at Bethel, they interpreted it a certain way. And every time someone played, even to adding parts, like when Anthony Skinner did it, he added the whole kind of improvised part, the David
Gray.
It wasn't improvised, it was David Gray.
So
just a little lift.
But it just so the song just kind of like developed and grew, and it kind of like it took on a life of its own. But right from the minute the song was conceived, there was something in it where it was like it came so easily, but it was a true reflection of what God was doing in our culture and in our community. And that's why it came so easily, because it was like those chords, that was the sound. And then, you know, singing in the glory of your presence, that's where we were, you know, at that moment in our lives, we were constantly like in God's presence.
You were telling the truth.
Yeah, we were just saying, this is what it's like, this is what our life is like, because we were constantly in worship. We were constantly in this kind of place of meditating on God. And then to sing I Love Your Presence, it was
So we,
you know,
even more detail to that is it was actually like the night that I had just arrived back in the States after being home.
yeah.
I'd gone home to see family, something like that. I think it was probably after Christmas. I'd gone home to see family. I'd flown back to California. He'd come over to see me, and I was full of anxiety, and I'd said goodbye again. And I was only, I think I was probably 21, maybe when I wrote that still, and just, you know, horrendous to leave family again and again and again. So I was feeling really anxious. But when Darren started to play the chords and just, you know, playing me this thing he was playing around with, then I could feel the presence of the Lord and the peace. the peace
Isn't that great?
come. Yeah. And so that was where I Love Your Presence came out of, is because I love his presence, and it was
You
a
were just
real
responding
moment.
to that
I
moment.
was just
Yeah,
like,
you were just saying what your heart was saying.
exactly. It was peace. And that was one of the things I look back on. I hated being so far from home, but in worship, it would be the same songs that were being sung on the other side of the world. And it was the same sense of God's presence. And so it was home. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's what made it
You
home.
couldn't have been further away, but there's a place.
It's like the presence of God, you know.
It's like our friend Dan Wilt says, songs are a place we go.
Yeah.
You know, they're making space for something else.
Yeah.
And in this case, the presence of God that is the same in England.
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful.
It was a moment. It happened in a moment, but I think it was made by that whole season.
It was like that.
The
that
good and the
those
bad.
songs were like a soundtrack to what God was doing at that moment in that community, in that culture, you know. And that song was probably, you know, a really good cross section of that, you know.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to say about this song too, and then I want to ask you some more stuff about songs in general. I Love Your Presence is a beautiful example of a very simple A-B song.
Uh-huh.
And I just want to say to worship leaders and to songwriters, we need more of those.
Yeah.
Because you were talking a moment ago, Darren, about how there's been many iterations of this song.
Yeah.
And people interpret it, add to it, make it their own.
Yeah.
And there's something about really simple songs that work in all kinds of spaces, home groups, little church, big church, stadiums. But then there's also something about A-B songs that in a worship moment, it can go somewhere.
It was actually originally an ABC song, which it always kind of has been, but it was basically, you know, A-B, and then it had this section in the middle, which was kind of almost purposely written into it.
Musical.
It was a section for improvisation. So on the original recording, it just went into this kind of bridge section in the middle, where it was just like, you know, and I just kind of improvised these lines, you know, kind of singing.
It wasn't ever really written properly.
Yeah, wasn't it? It was just kind of like an improv part.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like when people would do it, they would kind of create their own improv parts.
Love it.
And then that's when Anthony Skinner, who's a good friend of ours now, we didn't know him at the time, because it was a similar chord progression to the David Gray song. So he, instead of doing the improvised part, he put the David Gray part in there, which was cool. It was a creative.
I mean, the
thing to
improvised
do.
part thing, it worked for that time and season.
Yeah.
And we always built that, and it just made sense. We're like, yeah, that's what you do in worship. You do improvising bits.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, gosh dang it, I wish we'd written a better third part for that song. It's really an
But maybe that was part
song.
of. Maybe that was part.
I think it might be part of the genius, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
you
we
know?
should
Leaving
all write
space.
2 parts and leave a gap.
I just want to say, maybe not every song needs to be that, but I do think there's something
Maybe
about.
it's a formula.
I think there's something about songs that are sort of in that form that hold room
Yeah.
for this spontaneous, almost like conversational aspect of worship.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
Where we're saying something to God, and like those other third unwritten parts are moments for Him to sing over us, or for us to.
But I guess a
Come
lot
back
of
in.
people would be uncomfortable with that, you know, like what the heck do I do with this part? That, you know, and other people will be like, yes, I'm set free by this bit.
That's right. I live for that moment. I'll just tell you.
Yeah.
That's
Hey,
cool.
can we talk about songs for a minute?
Yeah.
Yeah. Whoever wants to go first, or just jump in at any moment here. But I'm interested because you all are songwriters, and you've written together, which I just think is wonderful.
Yeah.
What's a great song? And I mean that in the most general sense. Like, what is in your opinion, what is a great song? I'm not even asking maybe what a specific song, but like, what makes a song great?
I think it's so subjective, but a great song is a feeling. It's a really great feeling, or a feeling that resonates with you, even if it's not a good feeling, even if it's just like a powerful song where it's like, oh man, I've been there. I've been in that moment. I've been in that place. And it could be just the line of a song that can make a song for you, you know?
Yeah. Well, can I tell you a story about what you're talking about right there?
Yeah.
Of course, I have a lot of friends who write songs. I'll tell you a song about your brother. Okay.
Yeah.
So Sam's song that we've been playing a lot here in the States.
Sam's my brother.
Sam
Samuel Lane.
That's right.
Check out his songs.
That's right. He's just, he's a beautiful person.
Follow him on Spotify.
That's right. Please, everyone, tell your mother. But I oftentimes So there's something about Sam's songs that do that for me. And I remember it was like at one of the worship leader retreats, and Tim Brown was leading this song. I didn't even know at the time who had written it. The first verse, the second lines of the first verse were, I thought it was the end, but it's just begun. And when Tim sang that, it landed on me so hard, right? And I started weeping. And I didn't even know that I needed to say that to God. But I didn't even know that I felt that way. But I realized, oh my gosh, how many times, and I just realized, oh my word, I've been walking around feeling like my life in a couple areas was completely over. And here's this song that's saying, no, it's really not. It's like, it's only just begun. And I think that's what you're talking about, right? Mm-hmm. And I just think that's a great song.
Yeah.
Perfect
example. That was the Lord's word to you. It was like he spoke it over you through a worship leader on the other side of the world.
Yes. And at the time I didn't even know it was your brother's song. Mm-hmm. I didn't even know what it was. I'm like, what is this?
That's all.
Yeah. I remember Joel Hatchett said to me once, he's one of the worship leaders from Lancaster. Mm-hmm. And when we were young, and it always kind of stuck out to me and rang true with me. He said, I think he was listening to a Martin Smith song, and he said, man, that song speaks my heart. And when he said that, it just kind of like, yeah, that's what it is. It's like when a song speaks your heart, that is what makes you love it, because it's like that song puts into words or puts into melody what you can't say for yourself, or what you want to say.
Love that. Can you guys just tell me where songs come from, or where did your songs come from as writers?
Yeah. Well, I think when you say that, part of the thing that you got to ask is, what is a song? Do you know what I mean? So like, if you pull it back from that a little bit and just go, where does the creativity come from? For example, in today's age, it's so easy to make a song or make a record, So for example, like when we were younger, to actually have the physical work it would take to make a record was quite a lot.
And it was expensive.
Mm-hmm. Like you had to understand how tape machines worked, and you had to, kind of like get everyone together in a studio and all these kinds of things. Whereas now, you can just plug a microphone into an iPhone and get some loops going, and it's so much easier to make stuff now. But I think it's always about just like tapping into that creative thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and how do you tap into it?
Well, I think it changes, because I think that's what I'm saying is, like, basically now, if it's so easy to make a song, then in some ways, as we've sort of evolved as a race, do you know what I mean, and created all these amazing tools for ourselves, that's kind of upped the ante of what it means to be creative. So now I think, the amount of work it used to take to kind of gather everyone together and get our amps going and get the tape machine and all that kind of stuff, that level of creativity might come down to a different mindset and a different approach, where it might mean people collaborating across the world, or people, finding new ways of new levels of creativity and stuff like that, like new ways of expressing themselves. Like even I think, like, say, for example, with a podcast like this, this is a very creative thing. Do you know what I mean? This is like a new medium that people are experimenting with. And, develop, it's like a podcast could be just as creative as a song.
Yeah, it's interesting what you're getting at, because there's a sense in which the technology has made making songs or making records more accessible.
Yeah.
But what I hear you saying is like that creative source.
Yeah.
It's like, how are we entering into it? It's always changing, right?
Yeah. To use our humanity to take the things around us and make something that's beautiful, and to make something that's glorifying to God. And, when people hear the music or hear the podcast or see the art or look at the videos or whatever it is, that they go, wow, that is moving. And that speaks my heart. Do you know what I mean? So I think now, 20 years ago when we were kids, when you plugged an electric guitar in, and you turned on some cool lights and you gathered people together, it was kind of amazing. We live in a different world now where it's like everything's changed, So what is amazing now is different. So the creativity now is like, how do you tap into that? How do you collaborate across the world? How do you create new mediums? How do you tell stories, in different ways, So I think that's...
I'm even thinking about, just since we're on the recording thing here for a second, I'm even thinking about drums in particular in recording, and how 20 and 25 years ago, it would be so hard to record drums well. They need to be in tune.
Yeah.
You have to have great gear to make them sound good. Way it doesn't just sound like cardboard boxes or something. And now you don't need a drum kit. You can buy some drum kit samples.
Yeah.
Play them with your little MIDI controller, and they sound amazing, right? Like so clean, so big.
Yeah.
And so the art now is not that.
Yeah.
It's something else.
Yeah, something else.
So how do I tap into that? You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
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 And you are a creative, so I'm just interested. How do you find the creative spark, or where does that spark come from? Where does the fire come from for you all?
You want me to say something, or do you want to say
If you've got
something?
something to say. I mean, are you ready? Is it on your tip of your tongue?
Okay, so
Go for it.
I've always been sort of like one of those people where it's like, once I get going, I'm just like a creative force, you know, so it's like I can create a lot of stuff.
It is
And
actually like his superpower.
95% of it is probably terrible. And in fact, it is terrible. And it's like, you know, but some every once in a while, I'll stumble across something good. But it's like, it's just, you know, tapping into that creativity is not hard for me, you know, but it's getting the good stuff that's hard, you know. But basically, what happened with me was I was constantly writing songs all the time. This is about 5 years ago. We were in California. We'd run this, we ran a school for 10 years where we taught songwriting and music production and all this kind of stuff. And then the recession came, you know, 2008. Everyone lost all their money, and you know, we carried on going as a school. You know, we were teaching people, all the kids in the neighborhood how to play music, we're teaching all the people in how to write songs and stuff. And eventually it came to this place where we were really in debt. We didn't have any money left. And we had this amazing school, but we were just kind of like,
We were paying for it
Yeah.
ourselves, really, at the end of the day.
and then
Yeah.
one day I came home and there was a piece of paper like nailed to our front door, and it was an eviction notice from our landlords because PG&E had wanted to remediate our studio where our school was. So our landlords, after 10 years, just kind of kicked us out.
They gave us notice.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it was heartbreaking, you know. So all of a sudden our school was gone too. So all of a sudden I found myself in this position where I was like, you know, had no studio, had no school, you know, and we were in a lot of debt. And so I had to like basically like move all my recording equipment to our little garage, and I set up a kind of studio in the garage. And
It's not one of those, it wasn't one of those nice garages that's got, you know, like drywall and stuff. And
Yeah.
it was, you know,
yeah,
a horrible, really, really hot, crusty termite, you know, garage. And he moved everything we couldn't
there was a mouse
sell
in
into
there
there.
and everything, you know. So it's this. So it was a difficult, dark time.
There's a point
for
to this
us,
story
you know.
to do with songwriting.
And then all of a sudden, I had a really good friend called Daniel Whittington that I was in a band with and toured with him for years. And he went on to get into the marketing world and became kind of a famous marketer. He now has hundreds of thousands of subscribers to his YouTube channel and everything like this. And I was talking to him. He was a good friend of mine, one of my best friends. And I said to him, Daniel, I don't know what I'm going to do. I've kind of hit this, you know.
I've got no studio, I've got no school, I've got all this debt.
Yeah.
I've got
he's
2
like,
kids.
Yeah. And
What
he's
the heck?
like, let me have a think about it. Let me ask around. A couple of weeks later, I get a phone call from this guy, and he's like, hey, I'm starting a podcast network, and I've heard you're the guy. So, you know, Daniel's told me you're great. So I want to hire you on the spot. This guy was called Ryan Dice. He's a huge marketing
He's
guy.
a huge marketing guru.
And I was like, yeah, I'd never even listened to a podcast at the time. I didn't even know what a podcast was. You know what I mean?
He
But I
goes,
was
do
like,
you think you can, I want to build a podcast network. No, I'm going to try a podcast. I'm going to build a podcast network. I've heard you're top guy in the audio space. That's how marketers talk.
I didn't even know what an audio space was.
But apparently, that's how they talk.
That's me.
Yeah. And then it goes, and Darren's like, yeah, I can do that.
I didn't have any. One though, from my experience of everything that I'd learned over the years, one thing I did know was I can figure it out. Do you know what I mean? I learned that you can figure out almost anything if you stick at it. And then secondly, I didn't have any choice.
Yeah, there's nothing like desperation. It focuses the mind.
Yeah. So I started working on these podcasts and learning about podcasting.
The good thing about that is that we didn't need the 2,000 square foot studio that we had to, give up. And he could do it on a laptop in his garage surrounded by boxes.
Yeah. I learned I didn't need that huge studio anymore. I could make actually more money on my laptop, Yeah. So we sold off all our gear. We sold off all our mics and all our equipment, and kept a couple of nice bits. But
that's right. Yeah, you
sold
keep
most of it
all
off.
choice parts.
The core rig.
But one day I was sitting there in my garage working on a podcast. And, the mouse was sitting there looking at me. And
you haven't told him about the mouse yet. There was a mouse in there, apparently.
There was a mouse in there, And all of a sudden a song came to me, because I'd be writing songs all the time. And I picked up my guitar and I started playing and singing. And it was like, the song started just kind of coming. And then all of a sudden I got this feeling of like, you know what? I can't do this. Because I knew I was in all this debt. And there was this podcast sitting on my laptop that I should be working on. So, and I was like, I need to work and feed my family and get out of debt and get out of this garage. So I literally I could almost feel myself, in my mind's eye, kind of reaching up and turning the tap off. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
This big wheel and just turning the valve round, and switching it off. And then I put my guitar down and went and sat on the computer and podcasted, just edited away and stuff like that. And that was the last song.
He turned it off.
Yeah. And that was the last song that I wrote for many years. And then we ended up...
And he told me, we talked about it.
Because the thing is I knew that if I started writing that song, it would be 10, 15, 20, 30 hours of work. Because it would be I got to write the song, then I got to rewrite it, then I've got to ask Jesse about it, and then start again from scratch, and then I've got to record it, and then re-record it, and then then
I've got to mix it, and then I've got to map, because he can do it all, right? So writing a song for us was...
just by starting that, I was creating a lot of work for myself, and I couldn't do it. So I stopped, and then I did the podcast, and I did that for the next few years. I just worked on these podcasts and made money and got out of debt. We paid all our debt off. And then we got out of California and we moved to Nashville and bought a house, and and it's been great, because it's I've learned a new industry. I've learned how to actually make money and all these kind of things, and I learned tons of stuff from these marketing guys, because they're, believe it or not, some of them are actually pretty cool guys, and they're clever too.
Yes, of course.
So I've learned a lot from them. But
unbelievable.
I didn't write any more songs, and a part of me kind of died. Do you know what I mean? During that time,
have you turned that spigot back on?
Well, I didn't.
This is where the story gets good.
This is where it gets interesting. Is a couple of years into it, we started going to Church of the City here in Franklin, and one day we bumped into this guy at Church of the City, and Jessie recognized him. She's like, I think I've seen that guy on YouTube before.
I recognized him from YouTube. It was Anthony Skinner. And the only reason that I'd come across him on YouTube is that he's one of the people that did a cover of our song back in the day. And a lot of people think that he wrote it. So I've seen his name loads of times. And then one day I'm like, well, who is this guy? So I look him up.
That record that
Anthony did?
Forever and a Day is the record. That record means a lot to me.
That's awesome.
Oh, yeah. I'm intimately connected to that record.
We should go out for lunch with Anthony one day.
We absolutely must.
He'd be great to have on the show.
Yes, that's right.
Yes, he's awesome.
Okay, so keep going.
So he goes to our church, but the church we go to is a mega church, right? So we are one of just many people, and lots of creatives, and lots of just stunning musicians. And nobody knows us from Adam. Nobody knows us. But I spot someone I recognize from YouTube across the room, and I'm like, well, actually, you spot a lot of people there because it's Nashville, but I spot someone that we can talk to for some legitimate reason. So I grab Darren and we go and say, hi, I'm Darren and Jessie. You did a version of our song and we just wanted to say thank you. So we had that conversation with him. And he was so gracious, so sweet, so awesome. And it wasn't until 6 months later that he actually did call you up to go for a coffee.
And what happened was the way that me and Anthony connected was not even as musicians, but he was starting to get into podcasting. Now he's a huge podcaster.
Yeah,
He's the
typology.
typology podcast guy.
He's on, you can hear him talking.
So at the time, he wasn't doing that. And it began with him. He knew that I was a podcaster, producing podcasts. And so he started to kind of get into this thing where he could have this opportunity to produce typology. And so he came to me and he's like, "Hey, Darren, you know, can we meet and talk? And, you know, can you kind of help me with this and stuff?"
In this new world that is Nashville that we've found ourselves in, we're not musicians or worship leaders here. You're
podcasters.
Yeah, podcast people.
So I
Darren
got together
is.
with Anthony and just, you know, and we connected over the podcasting thing. And that was the point where we became friends because we, you know, there was tons of stuff that we could work on and talk. And there's just, the podcasting world is a huge thing, you know. So we became friends through that. And, you know, he's just an amazing person. And then what happened was about maybe 6 months later, he started this kind of men's group in the mornings. And he invited me to come and be part of this because we'd had this connection through the podcasting. So it was really intimidating for me because this was like, you know, in Franklin or in Nashville, is this like men's group. And all the other guys in the group are like famous producers, you know, or famous musicians and just kind of like heavy hitters, you know. And I have to kind of show up to this group and you know, and with all these.
He's not even sure who half of these people are, but there's just an air about them. You just know. Oh, these guys are like really cool.
They're pros.
They're really cool. They're heavyweights, you know.
Yeah.
So I get to be part of this, you know, and that was a cool thing. And it was just, that was one of the first connections that I really made here in Nashville. And basically the group was, you know, a kind of this Bible study where we were delving into learning about, you know, that book, Voice of the Heart. You know, it's kind of like.
What's the guy who wrote it called?
I can't remember his name, but it's
a book called Voice of the Heart. It's about emotional. Is it emotional?
It's about learning to understand your feelings.
Yeah.
You know. But anyway, so we were doing this group and it was just life-changing, mind-blowing stuff where basically Anthony would help us to, you know, engage with our feelings and you know, understand what it means to, rather than run away from your feelings, what it means to be able to kind of sit in your feelings, you know, to feel sad, to feel angry, to feel glad, to feel, you know, lonely and, you know, in healthy ways, you know, and stuff like that. So it's this amazing group, you know.
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with music. It's nothing to do with Nashville.
Yeah.
It's all about men,
you
know, getting in touch. The goal of it is to become better leaders, isn't it? Yeah. Being a healthy leader and all this sort of thing.
So anyway, I'm at this group and I'm kind of quiet. I'm just kind of there experiencing it and going through it. But over the months, I start to build friendships and bond with some of these guys. And one week I show up and we're talking about worship in the group. And, you know, I said something in the group about how, you know, when I used to lead worship, it would be the point where I would really meet with God was that point where it was almost like jumping off a cliff. You know, you'd be leading worship and you get to this place where you'd be like, oh, I don't know about this. And then, you know, like improvising or whatever, you just kind of like leap off or like almost like surfing when you dive into a wave, you know, but that was the point where you would meet with God, you know, and I said that. And as I said it, everyone in the room was like, wow, you know, and Anthony was like, we've got to kind of key into that. So basically what happened was, you know, I told them the story of, you know, the story I told you.
Turning the spigot off.
Turning
Yeah,
off the tap.
Turning it off
the
to
tap.
be a podcaster.
So I told them that story. And then Anthony's like, okay, well, we got to deal with this. So he kind of stood me up. And, you know, it was just him and another guy at this point. And they both kind of just stood there with me. And they kind of put their arms around me. And Anthony just sort of said to me, you know, I want you to re-engage, you know, with that. And I'm like, I can't, Anthony, I can't do it. And he's like, says to me, I want you to use your imagination to take you to a place where you can re-engage with that, you know.
Because it wasn't that you didn't want to re-engage with that part of yourself.
Yeah.
It was you didn't know how.
Yeah.
I think the way that Darren was talking with us, there was lots of imagery, there was lots of examples, and Anthony was saying that imagination that you're using to talk to me right now, and that imagination that would make you so to speak, jump off the cliff when you were leading worship. You need to use that imagination to get you over this hump. That was kind of like the key, wasn't it? It was to do with your imagination.
Yeah. And when I was in college, I did this like real deep dive study into the blues, you know. And I remember when I was doing that, there was this story about the first ever blues song that was written. It was written by this guy called W.C. Handy. And he tells this story about one day, you know, somewhere in the South in Mississippi or something like that. He's standing at a train station. And this guy's like, he's like a band leader. You know, he plays like big band music with saxes and trumpets and all this kind of stuff, you know. And he's standing at a railway station waiting for the train to come. And all of a sudden he hears this sound. And it's like this unearthly sound, something like he's never heard before. And he's like, what the heck is this? And he looks down, and sitting there on the railway station is this old black guy, you know, just sitting there with this guitar. And he's got a bottleneck, a piece of a bottle. And he's like sliding it up and down the strings on the guitar. And he's kind of wailing and singing this like African-American, you know, sounding melodies with these Hawaiian sounding guitar. And he's like weaving together these like otherworldly sounding melodies. And this guy, W.C. Handy's like, this is incredible. I've never heard anything like this. So that night he goes home and he tries to, you know, kind of write it down. And that becomes St. Louis Blues, which was the first ever blues song that was notated, you know. And that story is always kind of stuck with me. It's like this evocative story of this.
Because you could really picture yourself in that moment in time.
Of this new music being born, you know, this blues music. And that picture came into my head, so I started telling Anthony this story.
Yeah.
And then Anthony goes to me, right, I want you just to sing out, Darren.
Yeah.
Just like that guy did.
There's
I want
no
you just
guitar,
to sing
there's
out.
no music.
It's just some dudes in a room.
Yeah, like
I'm
three
like,
guys.
I can't do that, Anthony. That's like jumping off the cliff. You know, he's like, yep.
Yeah,
you know.
but you just said
So-
that's when you meet with
Yeah.
God.
Yeah,
So,
Anthony
like,
says
and all of
you
a
got to
sudden-
sing
Yeah.
sing the blues. There's no
Yeah.
instrumentation. It's just you, me, Keith.
So
Is it
all of a
Keith?
sudden I'm standing in this room with these two guys, you know, and I find myself just like singing the blues at the top of my lungs, you know, and Anthony and Keith are just like bawling, and I'm just singing out these hollers, you know.
Yes.
And
I'm the wife, and I have no idea what it sounded like. I wish
Yeah.
I could.
yeah.
But is this when the tap came back on?
Well, what happened was after that, they both, Keith and Anthony, were like, wow, that was amazing. And I was kind of a bit disconnected from it. I was like, well, that was kind of weird. And I walked out into the street and kind of went home. But I did notice that I felt a little bit lighter, you know, after that experience. But I was still disconnected from it. But that evening, I was sitting in my daughter's room playing my guitar, and I just started singing and playing the guitar like I hadn't for a while. And my daughter walks in. She looks at me. She's 8. She looks at me. She goes, Dad, I didn't know you can sing like that. And she's like, you know, she grew up when she was a little girl hearing us lead worship all the time.
She's
but
been
then
around you her whole life
yeah,
as a musician.
and she, you know, but she'd never heard. And then she starts dancing, and
so
then,
there's something about it that's
yeah,
it's evocative for everybody around.
yeah,
Yeah.
So that was kind of weird. But then the next day, I was upstairs in my office and I was working on a podcast, and then I reach over and pick up my guitar and I start playing these chords.
Sometimes
And
you
then-
have to bounce. You have to bounce those
Yeah.
things out.
Yeah, so I just started playing the chords and I started singing, and all of a sudden a song just popped out, you know, and just out of nowhere, and it was this song called "Holding On Strong," and it just kind of came, and that was the first song I'd written in probably 3 years.
You know what I love about that story too is it's the mirror image of the first story, right?
Yeah.
Because the first story is you start working on a podcast out of desperation. You
Yeah.
feel a song come and you just shut the tap off.
Yeah.
And now you're working on a podcast.
Yeah. Yeah.
You could turn it on in some ways.
Yeah.
I love that.
So that's kind of where the creativity
Yeah.
comes from,
Yeah.
you know.
Basically what I hear you saying
Yeah.
is that creativity it's coming from elsewhere.
Yeah.
Maybe it was one way of saying it. It's coming from elsewhere. There's something about us that's wired to pick this stuff up,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
But what I think is very interesting is the truth of what I'm hearing you say in your story is we can either agree with that
Yeah.
or not, right?
Yeah.
Like we can, there's maybe ways in which we're at a heart level making conscious choices of turning things on and turning things off. I kind of love that image.
And also there was a place that I had to go to that Anthony and Keith helped me get to, which was this, it's kind of like a little bit up and to the left or something like that. It's this, but it's this place where I had to go to tap back into that, which was the imagination. Do you know what I mean?
Also, I think, you know, like when you turned it off,
yeah,
I don't think that was disobedience to the Lord.
No.
Or it wasn't disobedience. It was actually in line with what the Lord was calling us into, a season we needed to do.
I totally see that.
Yeah. But the Lord was faithful to come and help you turn it back on
yeah,
when
Yeah.
the time was right. You
Kind
know?
of what I hear in that story too is like sometimes there's different things that are needed for different seasons, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe even one way of reading your story is the Holy Spirit was helping you channel your creative energy into a specific kind of task for a while.
yeah,
You know?
yeah,
Yeah, I can hear that.
Yeah.
It's beautiful though.
yeah,
Yeah.
And it's amazing too, because going through these few years of not writing and not leading worship, we've had other massive chunks of our story where we haven't been leading and writing as well. So in some ways that doesn't scare us. You know, when we did the school for 9-10 years, we started leading towards the last couple of years of that, but there was a whole long chapter where we weren't leading worship or writing.
Yeah, you guys have cycles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this past season, it's been good to know that I think the creativity that's in us, it can come out in so many different ways. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't have to come out in song.
Yeah.
It's cool if it does because songs are great, right? But I think that although it was a shock to the system, God has sort of confirmed that your gifting and the creative force that he's made you to be, Darren, can be used for other things too.
right.
Do you know what I mean? That
Yeah.
are beneficial and that are helpful and that are a blessing to the, you know, to people around you. And it's just, you know, it's because God is good at the end of the day, you know, because God is good.
Well, I love what
But-
Anthony was talking to you about, even in terms of like imagination, because I think that's one of the core human competencies when we talk about creativity. The opening chapters of Genesis are essentially God revealing himself first as a creator or as a creative person before he ever reveals himself as father or forgiver or any of these other things, right? He's first a creative person and he makes people in his image. Well, when Genesis says that God makes man and woman in his image, the only context for what the image of God is at that moment is creative capacity, right? And there's a sense in which those opening chapters are telling the story of God dreaming a dream or imagining a thing that isn't and making it into something that is, right? So I think that's one of the really brilliant ways of distilling creativity, you know? It's imagination. What is the glory of God that he has put in human beings? Part of it's imagination.
Yeah, because I think looking back on it, say with like I Love Your Presence, for example, as a song, I don't think you can separate, like a song is something that is, you know, it can go viral because a song is something that can be translated all over the world and it can travel around the world. It's this little, a song's this kind of like this unit that you can kind of like, you know, you can, you know, it's a completed thing, you know. But in terms of the creativity that went into that, you know, you can't separate that from what was going on in the culture at the time, like those little funky chords and the melodies and what was going on in people's hearts and the cool lights that we would set up at the burn service, and do you know what I mean? And just it was like all that creativity, was part of it, I think. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So and I think if you think of like songs are kind of born out of that. Do you know what I mean? And they can't really be separated from that. But what's great about a song is it endures and it goes on and it takes on a life of its own. But they're born out of...
If it's a good one.
If it's a good one.
Yeah.
But they're born out of these creative cultures and communities where like God is on the move or
Place.
something is happening. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something about place.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same thing. I'm a bit of a wine nerd. I mean, it's the same thing with wine. Like, great wines are expressions of place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not just generalizations of a really big area. Though
Right.
they can be. Like supermarket wine
Yeah.
on the label,
Yeah.
it doesn't tell you where it's from
Right.
because it's from everywhere.
Yeah.
But the most expensive wines in the world are from extremely small patches of land, and
Yeah.
the label tells you that, right? And
Yeah.
so I think there's something about songs as well. They're distillations of time and place.
Yeah.
And that's what gives them concentration or the beauty or the value or the,
Yeah.
I guess one of my favorite writers, Heschel, would say the ineffable, like the thing we cannot say. We know it, but we just cannot say it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love
Yeah.
that.
That's
Jess,
cool.
can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What inspires you, like as a songwriter? Or where does inspiration come from? Like what gets you like, oh, I feel it?
Well, it's a good question. I've always been super inspired by other people's melodies. I mean, there's been distinct times where I've been like, I hear a song or whatever, and I'll be like, oh my word, how did he come up with that? That is such a good melody. Yeah, it's so simple. Yeah, how does that happen? It's like, to me, it's like a gift. But there are songwriters that they know the mechanics and the art of songwriting in a way that I don't. Okay,
Yeah.
So I'm not a musician, as in I don't play anything. I mean, I led worship in a home group for a while, so that was my extent. But so for me, there's a lot of mystery to that. So I find songs fascinating. But for me, most of the time when I would come up with a melody or something, it would be during worship or during band practice.
Yeah.
Or if Darren was playing, like, for example, I Love Your Presence came when he was already playing something.
Yeah.
And then, the melody and the words came to me like that. So because I don't have an instrument, I can't just come up with stuff. But I do write like songy type, prosy type, poemy type.
Yeah, starting points.
I do write things down. That's like a good thing. Just for me personally, I do write sometimes. And quite often it'll be certain phrases or scriptures and things like that just stand out. Like I love the way they sound, or I love the imagery, or I mean, it was when we wrote Your Love Endures. So after a long season of not writing any worship songs, we wrote a song called Your Love Endures when we started doing worship again at a Calvary in San Luis Obispo, Calvary Church. And we wrote Your Love Endures, and the kids were like babies, crawling, toddling around the house. And it was like fresh air flowing through the house, One of the things I feel is so true is when you write a song, when God gives you a song, it's a gift to you. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes it's a gift to other people too, but it really is a gift. Like that song, Your Love Endures, it's on our Hand of God record, and Sam did a cover of it on The Fire, I think it's on. But I had a Post-it note on my mirror with some, a scripture for literally several years of some phrases that I loved from Isaiah. And so when Darren started writing the thing, and we had a bit of a song, I was like, I went and got the Post-it note off my mirror,
Yeah, you'd lived with it.
Yeah, it was something I loved, and I had it there. You wipe away my offenses like clouds, like the morning mist, You know, how cool is that?
Yeah.
So we put that in the song, you know, but yeah, when we wrote our first song from a long season of no songs, it was like fresh air through the house.
Yeah.
And it was for us, you know.
Yeah.
And I think it was for our church, you know, it was like fresh air for our church too at the time. So yeah, for me, if we're not leading worship and we're not having band practices and we're not playing worship together, then I'm unlikely to write a song. But I do have little things rattling around, like concepts or ideas or some, you know, scriptures.
Isn't it
and things.
interesting hearing about your process? Isn't it interesting that it seems like inspiration, you wake up around other music.
Yes, I do.
Like you get
Absolutely.
in it, and then whatever that is, it wakes something up in you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Which just reminds me of the thing we were talking about several moments ago.
Who we are and
who you are together as a couple, but then also even like your story about leading worship so many years ago in the burn service. All of these things were happening in it, right? So it's like everything is a context for the other thing.
Yeah.
Everything is touching something else, which is making something happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. More allows for space for more. More makes more space for more. I'm saying it poorly, but
Yeah, that's true.
I have it in my brain, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
And that's
Love that.
how these worship communities
Yeah.
like kind of explode. You know, these communities and cultures that just, you know.
Well, there's a reason why some of the biggest movements of worship in the world are located in individual cities.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's a synergy that happens when people live together.
Yeah.
And when the gift that one person carries expresses itself, it always wakes up the gift in you.
Yeah.
You know, anytime I'm feeling non-inspired, all I have to do is listen to good music. Like great music makes me want to write.
Yeah.
Great food makes me want to cook. Great art makes me think I can paint. You know, or whatever it is, you know.
That's cool.
There's something about beauty.
Yeah.
It always wakes you up.
Yeah.
It does for me anyway.
Yeah.
That's cool.
All right. Hey, can I ask you each one final question?
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you hoping for? Or what are you dreaming about?
3 weeks ahead on a podcast.
What do you mean?
Well, I'm joking, but we were talking before we hit record about,
Oh, yeah.
gosh, how it's so hard to get ahead on podcasting because that's Darren's job. He produces 4 podcasts a week and we're always just desperately trying to get ahead to give ourselves a bit more breathing room.
Yes. So your joke dream is I'm dreaming
My
about
joke
being
dream is
3
getting
weeks ahead.
Yeah,
Yes.
because I work on a couple of those podcasts a week too. I work on it. But what are we hoping for? I suppose just more of the life. Like we've been through a very long, quite painful season of several years, haven't we, honey?
Mm-hmm.
So of, you know, disappointment, uprooting, moving across the country, reestablishing, putting down roots. I mean, it's just been huge. And so I think we're now feeling less traumatized, less disoriented, and I'm just hopeful of new life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of some flowers and leaves on the trees that, you know, have been rerouted.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Total.
Repotted.
Darren, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, you know, whenever I am playing music, you know, especially probably in worship or that kind of thing, it's like that is being truly present and being in the moment and being kind of alive. And that's an amazing thing to kind of get to experience. And, you know, or even just with writing songs, like there's something happens, like you said, a breath of fresh air when you write a song, you know, sometimes that you just feel clean on the inside after you've written it or something. I don't know. You know what I mean? It's just that, you know.
That's how Darren is. I think that is especially you because you're like, God has wired you especially to create, you know what I mean? So if you're not creating, then it just, everything is off.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it's amazing to get to participate in that. But at the same time, it's like in the last couple of years, I've learned an awful lot. Do you know what I mean? And when I was younger, I was so naive and so sort of like, I just was so much kind of going with the flow, and I was so focused on the creativity, that there was a lot of things that I didn't understand about just this is the way the world works, So in the last couple of years, I've learned a lot about like how does the world actually work, and then how can creativity fit into that, and thrive in that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also work together with people who aren't creative, and so that's been a good learning experience for me.
Yeah. So maybe this next horizon is a synergy between some new wisdom and old creativity as well. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. Could we just do one more thing? Could one of you or both of you, could you pray for the creative community that listens to this podcast?
Yeah.
Would you just maybe pray for the songwriters that they would write songs and sing the melody that's really in their heart to sing? Yeah. I would love that.
Yeah. I'll say something.
You can say amen and stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Agree with me.
Let's organize this.
Yes. Yeah.
Holy Spirit, I just ask that you would descend on the people that are listening to this and the communities that they're immersed in. And I just pray for new songs. I pray for melodies from heaven. I pray for a breath of fresh air to blow through their homes first and blow through their churches and their community with new life, Lord Jesus, with songs that speak the heart, with songs that truly cause singing to rise up, the songs that will make people just want to sing. And Lord, songs that would fix eyes really completely and truly on you, God, and who you are and what you do. I pray that you would bless the worship leaders and the songwriters and those who've never written a song before but have always wanted to. I just pray your presence would be on them. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Hey, guys, thanks for coming on the podcast. Thanks for letting me hang out in your house.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, and listen, we're going to come back and do part 2 at some point, right?
Okay,
We joked about it.
No, we have
and part 3 and part 4.
We're going to. We're going to.
Okay.
All right, everybody. Peace.
Hey everyone, Casey Coram here, producer of the Ferment Podcast. Thanks for listening. I just wanted to remind you about our Sing Together conference in Nashville, Tennessee from March 26th through 28th. It's going to be a great time and we hope to see you there. For more information, go to vineyardworship.com. Also, don't forget to check out our latest single, God of Rest, Dios del Descanso, wherever you listen to music. All right, people. See you next time. Peace.